Mention Forest Whitaker's name and you can immediately conjure up memories of his powerful on-screen portrayals which have riveted audiences and created box office hits for decades.
In the words of the ancients, matters of great concern should be treated lightly. Matters of small concern should be treated seriously.
Louis, now is the time to tell us everything you know about this mysterious weirdo.
Ghost dog, power equality.
I always see everything, your brother.
He calls himself Ghost Dog.
What?
Ghost Dog. Ghost Dog? He said Ghost Dog.
Nicholas, tell me what is on your mind.
I have to go home now.
You cannot. You are like my own son.
I'm Nicholas Garrigan, and I'm from Scotland.
Your home is here.
He's changed, hasn't he?
He has always been like this. You have to find a way to get out.
I am surrounded by traitors. The British say I am a madman. The Americans, I am a cannibal. These are lies.
He's going to kill us, Nicholas.
Are you political, Mr. Gaines?
No, sir.
Good. We have no tolerance for politics at the White House.
I'm Cecil Gaines. I'm the new butler.
You hear nothing, you see nothing. You only serve.
You know he got that job himself. The White House called him. He didn't call the White House.
I want to hear all the stories.
I don't know how many stories you're going to hear because they done swore him to some kind of secret code. I'm so proud of you.
Did you go to an all-colored school, Cecil?
I didn't go to school, Mr. President. I grew up on a cotton farm.
As an actor, he's earned every honor you would ever want. Everything from an Oscar to an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and a BAFTA award. His Hollywood resume is impressive, but so is his humanitarian resume. His initiatives focus on finding peaceful alternatives to armed conflict and violence. He co-founded the International Institute for Peace at Rutgers University in 2011. He also serves as a UNESCO Special Envoy for Peace and Reconciliation. In 2012, he launched the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative. Known for taking on difficult roles on screen, off screen, his projects can be just as daunting. He's implementing programs in South Sudan, Uganda, and Mexico. The aim is to provide tools for young people and their communities to create peace building and conflict resolution in their societies. Forest Whitaker, welcome to our broadcast. Thanks for coming in.
It's good to be here.
We just showed your greatest hits package and we just skimmed the surface. I mean, is it fun for you to look back on that stuff? The memories come back, or is it just like you're not comfortable watching your own stuff? Or
No, I'm okay. I mean, it's like different lives for me sometimes, and you forget them, but they still exist in you, and you get some emotional feeling from something you might have seen. Every single character is like another life incarnate for me. I guess I get to learn more and grow, and it's a very special thing, a special job that I get to do.
I told him about a couple of your lives, Hollywood, humanitarian life, but let's go back even further. You grew up in South Central LA, and there's this running narrative that, boy, that's tough stuff, and perhaps it was, but there's this other narrative that you saw, witnessed with your own eyes, your mother. I mean, this incredible story, which I don't think really emanates, those kinds of stories don't really emanate from South Central LA. So how much did it shape you? I mean, the tough stuff, and then watching your mom and what she achieved.
I mean, I think certainly my mother's work ethic and her teaching me about like embracing life was important. She was raising 4 kids, and at the same time, she was putting herself through college. She got 2 master's degrees while she was nurturing us to like become who we are, you know. And so certainly it helped me and it influenced me. I think some of the things and lessons that she taught me as a kid have stuck with me for a long time. I think, you know, primarily like one of the lessons about believing in something. And that was something that she always like tried to instill in me. As a kid, you know, she would say, I don't have to believe in what she believes, but I have to believe in something. And I think that permeates my life. And the environment itself South Central Los Angeles. It's changed over the years, but it taught me a lot too. And I think is the place itself is responsible for some of my choices now as I work in conflict transformation and resolution of peace. You know, because there was these moments, you know, that happened, the historical moments that I was a part of that at the time I didn't realize. You know, there was the Panther Party, which is around the corner from my house, and I used to see them every day, and they would invite me to the breakfast program. And my mom didn't let me go, but they would always be playing with me and talking to me, and I remember distinctly when they blew up their building. And as a kid going by there and seeing that and even kind of walking through the ruins of that, it affects you and it makes you think about conflict and about loss.
One of the things that you say that I think is very thoughtful is peace is more than the absence of war. I mean, people don't really think of it that way. It's a lot more provocative how you put it out there. So what are some of the things that run through your head as you look at this issue?
Conflict does always exist. You know, conflict exists in a small way all the time. And conflict at times can be very positive to our growth. It can force us to find solutions to problems. It can be as simple as getting out of a bed for someone, the conflict of being able to overcome the limitations of their own body. But the thing is that the seed of being able to live a good life is peace. To be able to have that and to move that outward into your environment is very important. And so we try in the work to try to sort of nurture that kind of seed inside of people, because it's the way they'll touch the world.
It's interesting. I interviewed Jimmy Carter some time ago.
Oh, wow.
Of course, he, Camp David Accords, but then just this last year, more violence in the Middle East. And it seems like it's this recurring kind of narrative over and over and over again. So how do you bring peace to an area where turmoil is almost a daily occurrence, where people are almost conditioned that this is part of their lives? Because it has to be broken, doesn't it?
I think that's one of the reasons why I focus a lot of my efforts towards the youth, because there's critical times where people are making decisions in the formation of who they are. I think a lot of times we forget, like, especially in war, we forget the economics of war. You know, we forget how conflict is perpetrated and moved forward by lower economies at times. And so to be able to offer youth another opportunity to walk away from the idleness or whatever problems or the things they don't have, to be able to let them communicate and see each other for the first time. When we did our program in Jonglei State in the South Sudan, we brought these kids together. You know, this is the same place where the real conflict of the Civil War really kind of took place in South Sudan. And these were like tribes from all around that state. And these youths had never met each other. And so then when those youths came and were trained, they got to know each other. They started to understand each other and form bonds and friendships with each other, even between warring tribes. So then when the conflict happened, those same youths, because of their new understanding, started to contact each other across tribal lines to bring each other to safety. And so there's a very powerful thing in that, in not just the education of understanding, but the understanding of the connectivity that exists between us, and that we are connected, and that we are similar, and we are the same, even in our differences.
You mentioned the economics of war, and clearly it's an economic engine in many respects. I mean, there are a lot of people who profit from war.
Sure.
What about the economics of peace? I mean, you're out there, but I mean, clearly, when you look at great countries around the world, it doesn't seem like they're investing nearly as much in that as they are in the economics of war.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Because, like I said, with that seed of peace, you can build, you can develop. Without it, you can't. You can't, like, build the economies, you can't build the structure for education, you can't build a society without that. And from that building, there's large losses of finances. Billions of dollars are being lost all the time because we can't find peace in certain places. You know, where the numbers of speaking about 8 billion or 2 billion don't mean a lot to us. You know, in war, we're like, well, this is what it'll take to do this. It'll take us $3 billion in order to feed these people who don't have food. It would have taken us $100 million to nurture that and to build an economy and allow the food to be grown and to train people in agriculture and train people in pastoralization and train people in all those things. So there's a big gap, and that's why with the work we do, you know, it's the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative, is to help sort of soften the ground to be able to develop things, to create projects. Because what all those youths were doing was creating projects in their individual communities to build their communities. And by building these projects, they felt they would be able to build peace. And that's a part of how we develop the nature of our work.
You know, it was funny you threw out the numbers, and I always say for every number there's a name, for every figure there's a face. And you've seen these, you know these names, you've seen these faces. You had the chance to talk at the UN, and I want to run a clip, and then I'd like to chat about that. So let's listen in to what you had to say.
There was a former child soldier I met in Uganda. He and his parents had been captured by the Lord's Resistance Army. The LRA trained the boy as a soldier, and they forced his mother and his father into labor. When his parents could not work anymore, the boy looked on helplessly as the LRA executed them right in front of him. One day, he saw an opportunity to escape. The boy ran from the camp, found a place to bury his uniform, his gun, and his army gear, and wandered alone through the bush. He came upon a family. They took him in. They fed him. But the boy told me that in that moment, as he was sitting down to eat dinner with these strangers, he suddenly felt so afraid. Here he was in this warm home with a normal family, and he had no idea how to behave, how to talk to them, how to eat like them. He left, found where he had buried his gear and his weapon. He dug it up, and he went back to the same LRA that had killed his parents. This isn't a parable. This is a true story about a real boy, but it encapsulates the struggle that thousands of other child soldiers just like him face. Child soldiers are trapped in a prison without walls. Even after the wars are over, many of them cannot go home because they feel safer more at home in an army camp than a loving family.
A prison without walls, so eloquently stated. And you can see on their faces, you know, a riveted audience. What was it like giving voice to these young people that you've met along the way to tell their stories?
I think it's important to allow them to be heard in the best way they can. They can be brought to the situation of, you know, to let people understand what's really going on. And then inside of that, maybe insert themselves to understand it even deeper, you know, to insert themselves inside the story to say, well, this boy went back. Would I do that? I could never do that, or I could do that, or why would you do that? And you see cyclical things.
There's a photojournalist in New York, Lori Grinker, who did this book After War, where she went back and found all these people who fought in wars and took pictures of them.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, one of her pictures is really haunting. It's of this young boy in Liberia, Otis, where he wanted to reenact one of his scenes, and he told her, I had a title. I was called Captain Dirty Ways because of all the bad things I did. But as he was sitting there posing for the picture, and what's haunting about this image is you look at his eyes, and he's gone back there, and his eyes are hollow. And I said to her, I said, it'd be fascinating to go back and trace this kid and see what happens to him in 5 or 10 years. And she said to me, it would be fascinating, but who would care? Who would care? And what she was saying was it's so difficult to tell or sell that kind of story. It's much easier to sell the Justin Bieber story. And I know that you're fighting that fight as well. How tough is it to get the message out and get people to care?
I mean, I think we're still working on that, you know, to let people understand. I mean, look, like take it for instance, in the South Sudan, like 10,000 people have been killed. It's a lot of people. I don't think the message has been out there clearly enough for people, and even if it is, it's hard for them to understand. I think years ago I was working with Malaria No More, and I was having to speak in Washington about it. And I remember the only way I could illustrate it was by saying, You know, every 30 seconds at that time, it's longer now, a child dies from malaria. And so I've been speaking to you now for 10 minutes, so there are 20 people on the floor in front of me. So the same thing, you lose that perspective in war. You really lose it when you start talking about tens of thousands of people too being lost. And then the vibratory, or the way it moves outward, you know, because that perpetration continues to like move into families, into homes, to your neighborhood, to your city, to your state. It just continues to move outward. One act of violence can like change an entire community, and change a nation even. This, you know, just as I believe that in some ways acts of good can do the same.
I hate to use a phrase that's used in war, since we're talking about child soldiers, but victories often talked about. What do you see as the victories, and are they small victories, or do you know, each step of the way you see change? I mean, it's not just working with them and bringing them together, which is fantastic, but it's also talking to the world body like that and almost kind of shaking them, saying, you know, this is an issue, you got to think about this. What are the victories for you?
They're different. I mean, like you were talking about that photograph. I mean, I know that I've met youths who like had that hollow look in their eyes, you know, and then 3 years later, I've been able to see the spark of light like reiterate, and it gives me complete hope. Youths that couldn't like sit alone, you know, because they couldn't sit with themselves, who they are, what they did, and now who are able to like find some solace. Because I'm working on a Children Not Soldiers campaign too, you know, with the SRSC, Leila Zuriga. We've been working on that in different countries. But some of our work, you know, is not necessarily around child soldiers. We're working in Mexico, which is a little more somewhat cartel driven, but not really. We're working with some youths there that I think are really strong. We're opening up our second branch there as well. We're starting to develop stuff here for the conflicts that we have in the country that we're going to put inside of the school system. You know what I mean? Because there's like, as I say, there's these conflicts going on everywhere. And so this has to be addressed in our lives, you know, to move forward as human beings, to evolve, to become better, more caring, more empathetic, more socially connected, you know, beings.
Well, you're doing fantastic work. Thanks so much for coming in and visiting with us. Really appreciate it. Sure. Coming up next, a terrorist son takes a stand against his father's legacy of violence.